We are looking at verse 15 today, and the section, of course, is verse 13 down through verse 16, which is the salt and light section. So Matthew chapter 5, look with me at verse 13 down through verse 16. Jesus is speaking. It's the Sermon on the Mount, and here's what he has to say. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand. It shall give light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Let's pray together. The overwhelming need of your presence presses us today. The impossibility of everything that's being proposed to us just grinds us in the ground, eliminates us, wipes us out, destroys us, unless we have you. So we're praying for a comprehension of truth, a clarity and revelation of yourself, and a gripping, a down deep inside gripping of the power and the presence of the Spirit of God in every single one of us, that you would somehow take your word and make it known to us. Lord, no agenda, no hidden deal, no con, no trying to manipulate you, no trying to get around, just straight on, face to face, eyeball to eyeball. Talk to me today. In your name I pray. Amen. I'm usually very comfortable with truth. I've grown to like truth. I know truth is reality, and it does good things in your life, and so I normally have very little problem with truth. But I'm having a very difficult time with this truth this morning, so if you get up in the middle of this sermon and walk out, hey, I understand. I feel like that myself sometimes. So don't worry about it. This is really hard today. Really face on in my mind. And so I'm dealing with this myself. We started, of course, in the Sermon on the Mount with the formation of the kingdom, which is the Beatitudes. And it's the foundation of everything, so there's no way to get around that. You can't even talk about the Sermon on the Mount without talking about this formation. And the kingdom formation is basically this. You are poor in spirit, absolutely helpless, have no way out of that, total, absolute destitute, no resource whatsoever. You are empty of everything that is good, proper, and right. And even your best deed on your best day still is filthy rags. So you are helpless. When you embrace that, a mourning takes place. It's an inside cry that literally overcomes you until your body gives way to that. So your physical life responds to the awareness of what you are spiritually within. And it just whelms up within you. And in that response to your helplessness, as you embrace that and recognize it, He comes in His overwhelming greatness. And He literally fills you and becomes the resource for your life. And it's what the Apostle Paul talks about, being crucified, and yet you live, yet you don't live. It's Christ that lives in you. So the life that you now live, you live by faith in the Son of God who gave Himself for you. So that becomes the dynamic. And in that intimacy, that you literally form the kingdom. So again, the kingdom is not a place to go to. It's not a dwelling place to get in. It's not a thing to attend to. It's not a membership to apply for. It is a relationship with your helplessness, His overwhelming resource, and those two things together bring an intimacy of oneness, a new creature kind of thing that makes you the kingdom of God. So He is not the kingdom. You are not the kingdom. It's us. We're the kingdom, Jesus and me. And in that embrace, we literally become the new thing. And that's what he's talking about. Now he brings us then to verse 13 through 16, which we're dealing with, and says, hey, this is not just for the fun of it. This kingdom thing is not just for, oh, I feel good. This kingdom is not, oh, now I get to go to heaven. This kingdom is not, whoa, now I have good breath. The kingdom is all about what? It's all about function. And he says, let me give you the function of how this works in the world, the function of what you're all about. And the key word all the way through, while it's not used in the passage, seems to become the word influence, because the kingdom is all about influence. And the reason I like the word influence is because it's not about a doing thing, although you influence people by doing things, but the focus isn't on doing something. The focus is not on accomplishing a task. The focus is on the influence that comes out of this relationship. Now, he symbolizes this, gives us imagery, and the imagery, of course, is salt and light, which is phenomenal imagery, because you don't do salt things and you don't do light stuff. And there's no instruction on how to be salt and how to be light. And since there's no instruction, it's not a doing thing, it's a being thing all the way through. And it's interesting that the salt deal is only given in one verse, and then there are 3 verses that are given to the light concept, the imagery of light, which tells you salt, light. Evidently, the light thing is 3 times as important to know about as the salt thing. It's interesting also that Jesus is never called the salt of the earth. We're called that by him, but he is called the light of the world, and then turns around and calls us that. So in the light imagery, there is a becoming like him in that whole imagery. And again, he gives 3 verses of explanation for it. And we're trying to walk through those 3 verses. The first one is given to you in verse 14. And it is literally our position. So he starts with that. What is the position that we have as we are kingdom people? In the influence and in the function of the kingdom. What position do you have? He says, here's your position. You are, you are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Now he adds this imagery of a city, and he only uses it in one little phrase and then marches on back into the light thing in verse 15, which becomes significant because he's taken the imagery of the light and he's focusing it distinctly upon the idea of visibility. A city set on a hill is not about light at all. It's about visibility. And he really is going to pound the idea of visibility. Your position then is to be visible. The idea of, I've been a Christian for 10 years and nobody's found out yet, is not a possibility. That just cannot be. Just cannot be. You cannot be a Christian without being visible. This wipes out the monastic movement. This wipes out, I'll go hide in a cave. This wipes out, well, hey, I don't have any influence. Yes, you do. And there's no way. Now, again, let me emphasize that his whole approach to the thing is not a doing thing. Well, if I'm going to be light, what do I need to do? Well, that isn't in the passage. I'm sorry. This is not an instructional passage on how to do this. See, that would have really been neat if he would have done that. If he would have told us, here are where the light switches are, go around and be sure they're on. Hey, I'll maintain that. I'll work hard at that. But he gives none of that stuff. There's no instruction. It's just, you are. In fact, it has the tone. It's in the indicative, which is a simple statement of fact. But it has the impact. It has the flow, the tone of an imperative. In other words, it's a command. This is what you are. And yet you can't do it. So the whole concept then comes back to this being thing of being who we are, which is we are light in the intimacy. But then that makes sense, doesn't it? Because if you're helpless, how could you do it anyhow? So if he gave you instruction, you couldn't pull it off. So the only chance you got is for him to come in his overwhelming resource, and in that embrace, you become something that you could not be otherwise, which is light. So in verse 14, he gives us this position that we have in the function of the kingdom. We are to be light. Now in verse 15, he moves us into the purpose. And again, the purpose is visibility. He's cleared that up in the city idea. And it appears the city has nothing to do with this, you understand? In other words, the whole passage, the whole 3 verses are on light, and he just injects this city thing to say, I don't want you to get off on other ideas about light. I want you to stay focused on the idea of visibility. A city is set on a hill, not by accident. You don't drag all that equipment, drag all that material, clear up the top of the hill just by accident. You do that on purpose. You don't dig into the hill for the foundation just because you like to. No, you do that because you want a city on the hill, and the purpose is that the city could be seen and be a vital part of what's going on in the area. So the whole emphasis of the city idea is distinctly the idea of visibility. Now, there's 2 ideas of visibility that we've talked about. One is the idea of being seen. So you put the city on top of the hill, why? To be seen, which is visibility. So everybody's going to know we're there. Hey, you're a kingdom person. What am I doing with you? I'm putting you in your world. Why? So you can be seen. Ta-ta, ta-ta. So I'm going to be seen. There's no way to hide. That's an impossibility. So if you want to be a secret Christian, hey, forget it. Well, what about the underground persecuted church? What about the places in the world where they have to go underground and keep secret? Isn't it interesting that even in those scenes, the church grows by leaps and bounds? They grow faster when we're underground than we do when we're above ground, which is an amazing thing. Why? Because you cannot keep, we are light, folks, and this thing cannot be hidden. So being seen is one of the ideas of visibility. Now, another part of the visibility idea is the idea of we are exposing. Light exposes, see, I'm being seen as a kingdom person, but the minute I'm being seen, whoa, that exposes what's going on around me. That's where the persecution of the last beatitude shows up. You are going to be persecuted. Why? Because you're light and you expose. When love walks into the middle of hate, see, when there is no love, all you got is hate, we all think we're okay because we all hate and we all alike, and you're like I am and I'm like you are, and we all hate. Then when somebody who loves comes in, we begin to say, good night. And that love that they are begins to expose my hate. And you think I appreciate that? No, I don't. Because that makes me look bad, makes me feel bad, makes me guilty. And I don't want to be exposed. I want to go on like I am. And so what am I going to do to you when you love me? I'm going to kick you in the teeth. I'm going to persecute you. And he says, oh, that's good. When that happens to you, rejoice. Rejoice. Why? Well, because that gives you greater opportunity to be light. And that's his whole appeal in the passage. And our purpose then, our position is we are light. We're not doing anything. We are just light. And in this light, we are literally there for a purpose, and that is visibility, to be seen and to expose. Then he comes to verse 16, which is the climax of this whole thing. And we're going to spend about 5 Sundays in verse 16. It'll be great. Can hardly wait. If we ever get there. So it's going to be great. Verse 16 is the climax of the whole thing. And verse 16 takes verse 15 and 16, or verse 14 and 15, and pulls it all together, and it talks about our presentation. And of course, our presentation is very simple. And if you lose verse 16, then verse 14 and 15 don't make any sense or are useless. It's just some nice phrases. So verse 16 puts the cap on it and brings it all together. And you'll know right in the middle of verse 16, let your light so shine before men, that purpose clause. That. Here is the purpose of the presentation that I'm going to make. And the purpose clause is that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. The only thing that can nullify the light, then, is self. Self nullifies it. And the minute that self-credit, the minute that self-reflection, the minute that self, well, it's only 5% me, and 95% that ruins it. That ruins it. The minute self gets its ugly head in there, bang, it's ruined. Every time. So the whole deal is that it may glorify your Father in heaven, which he just makes a huge point about. Now I want to go back to verse 15 and try to walk you through two ideas. One is the idea of the logic of the statement. Now I'm not asking you to take a theological view and say, well, that's true theologically, but not true practically. Not dealing with that. We're not going to take well, that's a spiritual concept, but in the real physical world, it doesn't play out like that. That's not going to be true. Jesus is very, very logical, sensible, lays it out, and says, let me give you something that you cannot, there's no possibility of you refuting it. Because it's absolute sense. So whether you know theology or whatever you are, if you have any sense at all, you're going to have to say, that's true. So he gives this tremendous logic of the statement. Now you'll note in verse 14, you are the light of the world. Now again, that's in the indicative, which means it's a simple statement of fact, but it has the tone of an imperative, a command. I command you to be this. And when you get down to verse 16, there is the command for sure, because that is in the imperative. Let your light so shine. I command you. It's an imperative. You don't have any choice. This is a command from the king himself. So the imperative is definitely surrounding this whole concept. Then he moves into this logical play out. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Now, if you don't like the city idea, let's just go to a one-house deal, a family deal. Hey, I got a house in the country. Why? On 15 acres. Why? Behind trees. Why? So you can't see me. See, I don't want you around. Leave me alone. I put a gate in front and I keep it locked so you can't even get in my driveway. That's not this. This is, I built my house on top of a hill so everybody around me can see. So logically, do you see it? Logically, when he's talking about a city set on a hill, there's no choice. Logically, he's talking about visibility. And again, the Bible scholars tell us that when Jesus was giving this at the base of a mountain, there was a large hill not far away on which a city sat. So a city puts itself on the top of the hill for the purpose of saying, we want to be vitally involved in what's going on in our world. And we want to participate in everything that's taking place. So visibility is, we're not running away, we're not hiding. The whole idea of light then becomes the idea of visibility. Now, he says, that's the city thing. I focused you on visibility. Now, let me bring you back to light. Verse 15. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a bushel or a basket. The word for basket there is the common, ordinary basket that every household would have. The lamp is a normal little lamp, and hey, it's not much. It's about 3 inches long. It's about 2.5 inches wide, about 1.5 inches deep. Has a hole right here. You pour oil in it. Has a little spout. You take a wick, you stick it down the spout, the end of it goes into the oil, begins to soak the oil up, sticks out the spout, there's the little wick, soaked with the oil, you light the thing, and it has a little flame giving a little light. I mean, it's probably not bigger than 2 matchsticks put together in light. So it isn't like, whoa, I'm blinded. It's like a little light. If you take the little light and put it on the floor, you can't get much out of it. You got to put it on a lamp stand. So it... Now he says, come on, logic. Do you think I'm going to go to the trouble to go to a store, as bad as I hate shopping, and buy one of those stinking little things that they're too expensive, and I'm going to get that thing, and I'm going to get oil besides. Psst, oh, got it all over me. And I'm going to stick a wick down that spout, trim the thing, and I'm going to get the trouble to get some flame, some fire, and light the end of that thing. You think I'm going to do all of that and stick it under a basket? Duh! That does not make any sense in anybody's book. Logic, folks, logic. That does not make any sense at all. So the reason I'm going to light the lamp is to put it on a lamp stand so it can give forth with light and light the entirety of the house. Is there an amen in the house? That makes sense, right? Pure logic, no theology. Hey, dump everything but the practical, hey, everyday kind of thing. So, if I'm totally, absolutely helpless, and I've embraced that helplessness, and He has come in His overwhelming resource, and He is literally now filling me, and He and I together are literally operating life, and it's not me, it's not Him, it's us. And in that intimacy of His presence, He literally is standing me out here, and I am in my world, and I am the light of a world. Do you think He did that so I could hide? Well, no. Did He do that so I could run away? Well, no. What would be His purpose in filling my life and shining His light through me, that it might light the whole house? Well, preacher, this is where it really gets rough for me. I don't want to get involved. I don't know what to tell you. You can't be in the kingdom then. Well, I want to be saved and I want to go to heaven. Well, fine, but I don't want to get involved. What? That's an impossibility, people. That's like saying, I want to be water. I want to be dry, though. I'm sorry. Logic will not allow that. There is no possibility of that. That if you are going to be light, you have to be involved. You are going to be seen. There is no way not to be seen. I just don't know what to do with that. Well, I've got my own stuff going on. I know. I've got my schedule's really busy. I understand that. Or are you talking about getting involved in the church? That would be nice. But we're talking about kingdom involvement here. Well, do I have to come to every time the church doors are open? Do I have to be there? It'd be nice. We're talking about the kingdom in our community. We've got to win this community, folks. And winning the community is not a handful of people getting it done. It's the kingdom people shining. And every kingdom person has to be involved in that. Well, preacher, how do I do that? Well, you get a band and go down to the square and sing. I can't sing. See, there's no instruction. Do you get that? There's no instruction on how to do that. Why? Because it's not a doing thing. Which means that if I'm helpless, I can't do it, and He is overwhelming He is the overwhelming resource, and that He and I are going to get together. Obviously, do you suppose He has a plan? And that He could actually begin to do a plan through me? You understand, the early church won a world with this idea. In 70 years, the early church won their whole world to God. It's just amazing. And you can say, well, they had colleges. No, they didn't. Well, they had money. No, most of them were slaves. Many of them were slaves. Well, they had quartets. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They had charismatic preachers. No, we don't hear about them. They had the Bible in a variety of translations with various covers, even blue jean covers. No, they didn't. It hadn't even, the New Testament hadn't even been written. Well, they had a church structure, a nationwide church structure that literally set up and had committees and did get demographic studies and literally, no, they didn't. Well, what did these boys have? And they won their world. Well, what was their strategy? I don't know. Lots of people have tried to take the book of Acts and get a strategy out of it. But the only strategy you get is the guys are hanging around saying, these boys are untrained and unlearned. I think they're ignorant. Well, what are they doing? And yet they won their world. So you're really hard-pressed on the strategy thing. Because the whole deal was that God took somebody who was totally, absolutely helpless and destitute and filled him with the Spirit and began to be his resource in his life. And the guy began to shine on his level. And again, they won a world with this. See, when persecution came to Jerusalem and the church in Jerusalem, wham, they scattered like rats. And everywhere they went, they became ministers, full-time, down to it, all-out, called of God ministers involved. And everywhere they went, they were there for the purpose of. Can you imagine that concept? I mean, God picks this guy up and says, whoo, I'm going to put you right in the middle of the grocery store business. Whoa! And there he is in the grocery store. But he's not there to sell groceries. Well, he might as well while he's there. But he's not there to sell groceries. You know why the boy is there? He's light. And he touches people every day that preachers can't get to. That's the whole concept. God picks a guy up here like you, and he grabs a hold of you, and he plants you right in the middle of whatever you're involved in. A school teacher. Whoa, you're not there to teach school. Well, you might as well while you're there. You got to do something with your time. But the reason you're there is you're light. Well, you can't pray in school. You can't stop me. You can't tell me I can't walk right down the aisle of my classroom and touch every chair and every desk in that place and pray. And what's going on in my mind, they have no idea. And fill my room full of the presence of God, and they've got to sit in that thing, sit in the presence of God all day. See, I'm light, man, and you can't stop me. Why? Because I got to shine, man. See, that's the whole concept, that we are light. And that there's this influence, there's this thing, there's this awareness of His presence that's literally coming out of us. Well, I don't want to get involved in that. I'm sorry. You can't be kingdom people then. Well, I'm bashful. This doesn't have anything to do with personality. Well, I'm embarrassed with my big nose. Doesn't have a thing to do with it. Light. See, the logic of this is just astounding. Now, let me take you to the second idea that goes along with this, which is not only the logic of the statement, but the light of the substance. Again, visibility in the passage, visibility is the issue. We're going to take this lamp. We're going to put the oil in it. We're going to stick the wick down the spout. We're going to light the thing. It's going to have a little flame. It isn't a very bright light. But, we're going to put it up on a lamp stand, and then it's going to give visibility to the whole room because of the highness of where it's located. Now, here's the dilemma. How am I going to talk about this? Here's the dilemma. Self, which is the deterrent to all of this. Self, which always wants its own way and never recognizes its helplessness. Self, which always feels like it's adequate and wants to do its own thing and never comes in mourning saying, I need to be filled. Self loves visibility. And what is he asking me to do? Oh, Manley, I want to make you visible. Oh, good. See, I want that. So this becomes really an interesting paradox. For the very thing that self wants, he's advocating in the passage. Do you see the danger in that? There's a real, oh my. See, I'm dead to myself. I'm helpless. I'm worthless. I'm a loser. I can't. I'm unable. And I finally come to the place where I recognize all that and say, Jesus, would you fill my life? And then he embraces me and whoa, here I am. And then he puts me on a lampstand and suddenly I'm And there is such overwhelming danger in that because self wants visibility. So do you recognize that one of the overwhelming battles we have within the kingdom and the church within the kingdom is that we're constantly fighting on the level of self-recognition? I left the church. You know why I left? 5 times. 5 times. 5 times. They spelt my name wrong in the bulletin. And everything I did, and they didn't even have my name right. So I went to a church where we don't have bulletins. Wow. Isn't that an interesting concept? That the very thing that deters the light shining is the very thing that he's doing to me and setting me on a lampstand. And that the fine line of how easy it is to be drawn back into, I want to be seen, and I'm this, and they don't recognize my real value, and I'm the one that did it, and he got the credit for it, and wow. John the Baptist, it's interesting in the John 5:35 passage. Jesus is talking about John the Baptist. And he says, John the Baptist was the burning and shining lamp. And you were willing for a time to rejoice in his light. When you look at the Greek of that, of course, it literally is laid out like this. He was the lamp. Which makes lamp, of course, a predicate noun. He, lamp, equal, with an equal sign in the middle. And that the participles are burning and shining. So the lamp is a burning and the lamp is a shining. And the characteristic of the lamp is burning and shining. And the idea of burning becomes really interesting. Jesus doesn't mention it in here, but you understand there's no light unless something is consumed. Nothing burns unless something is consumed. I wonder if that imagery is in part of this. Of course, he doesn't mention oil in the passage. He tells parables about oil later. 5 foolish, 5 wise virgins, and all about lamps and oil. And obviously the oil is him. And he gives the lamp. He gives the light. But here we are, lamps in this passage, no mention of oil, no mention of any of that, of what makes the light take place. And yet if there is a burning, the whole imagery of lamp is the burning idea. And in the burning, there's a consuming. And the minute you mention consuming, you know what happens to myself? Oh, I'm repulsed by that. Because if I'm going to be burned, if I'm going to be consumed, if I'm going to be all wrapped up in, if I'm going to be, what's the words to use? If God's literally going to come and ignite me, and what's going to be burned out of me, and what's going to help produce light is death to self. And if that's the condition in which the light takes place, that really makes me nervous. But that's the person he could trust on the lampstand. And if light is going to come from the lamp on the lampstand, oh, what's going to have to be burned, all consumed in my being? It's going to have to be everything that's connected to the issue of my self-life. See, who wants to get in on that? Who wants to live a life where you never, ever, ever think about yourself? See, who wants to live a life where the whole motivation of your being is, how can I help? How can I flow my life out? How can I minister to your need? Do you realize what that would do to your marriage? It would ruin it. My wife and I have tried that, and we argue all the time. Because I say to her, no, we're going to do what you want to do. And she says, no, we're going to do what you want to do. I say, no, we're not. We're going to do what you want to do. She says, no, we're going to do what, and we just argue about it. Just ruins our marriage. Do you realize what that would do to your relationship? If it was never about you, it was always about how can I... See, this is really strong. And yet there is no light. And if you have self left, if self still reigns, and you're a lampstand, you're going to be sucked in. I'm here. And you have seen it, folks, in the church, in the kingdom, emphasis, people who were supposed to be light, and yet it was all about. And that's because we're on a lampstand. We're on a lampstand. And there is no chance of being on a lampstand and being the light and giving visibility to a world unless somehow, some way, self is literally brought to its proper place in Jesus. Now, in the imagery of life, this is the language of death. And the scriptures is full of this. It's in death that I live. And that there's no chance of life at all unless there's death. And it's only when I come to the place of absolute death, I'm talking death to all I want, death to my thought process, death to my opinion, death to my rights. Do you know what it is to give up your rights? Well, it's my life. Well, take your life and go away then. Because you can't be kingdom people. See, the only way this works is that in death and the yielding of all my rights and death to all my self, somehow he's allowed to be turned loose and I'm on a lampstand. Well, he couldn't trust you on the lampstand if you had rights. because I'd only put in 8-hour shifts. See, in the language of resurrection, the imagery of resurrection, the language is crucifixion. Oh, that I might know him in the power of his resurrection. Everybody wants to quote that. The rest of it is, and the fellowship of his suffering. See, that you can't be raised from the dead until you're crucified. And nobody wants the crucifixion. We all want the resurrection. But there's no chance of being a lampstand, a lamp on a lampstand. See, the light will not be. You got to come to crucifixion. And in the crucifixion, which is Paul's language again, I'm crucified with Christ. So it's such a beautiful picture of all the self and all the self-will and all the self out of proportion and all the self that's magnified itself being brought down to a position in Jesus where it recognizes its helplessness, and in the wonder of who he is, we literally become filled. See, in the language of freedom, in the imagery of freedom, the language is slavery. The locomotive says, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this. I'm a slave to the tracks, man. I want to go where I want to go. Well, help yourself. Whoa. Man, have I been derailed in my life? I've told you the Chinese have a proverb, he who spits into the wind, spits in his own face. Try it. Man, I've been wiping my face many a time. Wow. In the imagery of grace, grace, the language is forgiveness. I've been forgiven. That's all over the Beatitudes. I've been forgiven. Mercy, meekness. In the imagery of love, it is the language of lay your life down for another. Helplessness, overwhelming resource. Oh, kingdom stuff, light, lampstand. He can trust me. Jesus, I want to be trustworthy. I want to be trustworthy. And Lord, every residue, every smattering of self-will and self-desire and self-thinking and every residue that hangs on to power and self-desire and my rights and all of that stuff, God, would you, I'm helpless, God, I can't get over it. Would you do in my life what I can't do? Would you bring me to a place where you can make me the light of the world and you can put me a lamp on a lampstand and there's no risk of self wanting to be seen in that. God, forgive me for every time I ministered and it was a show. Forgive me when I performed instead of let you spill yourself through me. Forgive me for every time I was so wrapped up in being appreciated. I didn't get, ministry didn't, light didn't. Forgive me, God, for every time I was so wrapped up in my rights, of my opinion, and God, is it true of my life that I really don't care who gets the credit for it? Let's just get it done. Is that really true of my life? Would you do a work in me today and bring me into a new awareness of your presence and your intimacy and oneness with you, that would produce some light in my world? Heads are bowed. No pressure. No intimidation, just invitation. Come on, folks, we can be kingdom people and take our world. There's no light switches to turn on and off. It's the amazingness of who He is. Embrace. Oh, I want to embrace my helplessness today in a new way. Be obedient.